The old man approached the magic ball and asked what fate the heavens had prepared for them. He doesn't know what a pool of providence he started, but he won't refuse. But by placing his hand on the magic ball and accepting all the conditions, he realized one of his future students. Soon the boy began to train. But the other students teased him and said that they had never seen such a ridiculous level of skill in their lives. The boy said that he agreed with them, but of course it wasn't that bad, right? The boy in this story was an outer disciple of the Wudong sect, and his name was Yong Chun-un. But the teacher got angry and asked him what he was even talking about. He should stop chatting immediately and concentrate on sparring. But Un was very surprised at that moment and asked the teacher what he said. He apologized to him, and in his mind he understood that he heard someone's voice. But what was it? But again the voice came and asked the boy if he could hear it. Un didn't understand what was happening at all and started looking around. The opponent asked him if he had completely lost his fear, and how dare he ignore it. He immediately pounced on Un with an attack, not even waiting for him to come to his senses. But Un didn't lose his head and immediately covered his face with his hands, deciding that he would first block the attack. The opponent came very close to him and replied that Un was thinking hard because he opened from below. The opponent immediately after this dealt a powerful blow to Yuan's stomach so that he would no longer be distracted by such trifles and respect his opponent. The opponent said how he was smart enough to be distracted and ignore him when he was standing right in front of him, and today he would finish him off with his own hands. Yuan's opponent was the Wudong sect's outer disciple, Yin Shihu. The students laughed at this moment and said that Yun Chunung had been beaten again without a single chance of winning. But to just look at how he constantly challenges Shihu. His persistence is astounding. But Guy came up to them and started denying everything and said that his ability to take hits is what's amazing. The guys told him that he was damn right, who did not feel sorry for him and continued to beat him as he wished. But Un heard everything at that moment, and he asked, do they think that his patience is infinite? Un took the force into his own hands and attacked him in response, but with each blow from Una, who dodged it every time. And at the last moment of the blow, the opponent tripped him and the guy almost fell to the ground, who began to mock him and said that he was so curious as to how such worthless people ended up here. But Un couldn't stand it and replied that, like who, he came here to become stronger. But his opponent was stronger and dodged again, who asked him what he was talking about and immediately ran to attack, putting him in an awkward position, so that he found it funny and let him leave this idea for the next life, who immediately delivered a powerful kick to Yuan's head, leaving him no chance to defend himself. The voice was asking at that moment, had he really switched off? It was damn unpleasant for him to watch. The old man's voice said that he had potential, but was he really making no progress because he didn't know the right training methods? At the next training session, Un was lying on the ground unconscious, and he heard the master telling everyone to stretch out their arms and concentrate. But Un was flying in his memories at that time and always said that he wanted to become a martial arts master. And thanks to strangers, he realized that a person created from blood is destined not only to crawl on the ground. And the inexplicable admiration he experienced as a child grew into envy, which became an incentive, which prompted him to join the Wudong sect as an outside disciple. But perhaps because he lacked talent to begin with. Was this really how he was going to end up? Ung thought. But the old man was shouting at him at that moment to wake up. But Ung, in his sleepy voice, answered to give him 5 more minutes. The old man asked him how he could sleep when he was beaten like that. Un was very scared at that moment and jumped up and started apologizing. The students who were nearby also said that he scared them a lot. And what is he doing? And they didn't seem to hit him on the head. The old man said that judging by the boy's reaction, he could hear it too. Un began to ask what was that? Did the others notice anything? Could he really have telepathy? The old man also got angry and replied, what telepathy? Does anyone here have such skills as him? Un asked, then who is he? The old man replied that his name was Zhang Xianfeng, and he was also called Zhang the Bizarre, uncouth Taoist, and he was a very eccentric man, known for treating both emperor and commoner alike, regardless of their rank. As a martial artist, He is known for developing Taoist philosophy and founding the Wudong sect. And he is also believed to be the one who created Tai Chi. Asked, is he the same Zhang Xianfeng, known to everyone? Feng replied that yes, that was exactly it. But Ung didn't believe it and pretended that he understood everything. The old man asked him what kind of reaction this was. Feng asked, doesn't he think it's absurd? And inside he knew that this guy was very strange. Ung was very scared and thought, isn't it better if it's something absurd and he doesn't go crazy? Feng started laughing and said, what does that mean when choosing between the unusual and the abnormal? He would choose the unusual. But of course, he has to learn quickly if he wants to become the best martial artist. But at that moment, Feng looked at him and asked him what he was doing. Un asked him, is this what he was talking about? And he replied that because he was looking at this tall stone statue, his neck hurt. So here it is, his own statue. Feng started laughing and told everyone to look at this idiot. What a funny guy. Ung told him that the old man was not picky about words, as expected of a boorish Taoist. Feng laughed and replied that he even missed this nickname. But Guy came up to him and asked what he was doing there. He had to go already, because it was time for sparring analysis. Un replied that he would be there soon. But the guy who called him started to leave and saw that he was a crazy idiot. Un stood up and said that they were repeating their morning battles to learn from their mistakes. But Yin Shihu, he uses them as an excuse to beat him again and again. And now he has decided that he does not want to run away. He is not a coward who gives up at the first opportunity. He wants to win, and he wants to become stronger. Feng looked and told him that it looked like he was in quite a bind. Ung replied that he thought so. Feng asked if he was smiling too brightly for someone who was about to get into trouble. Ung replied, maybe he was just a weird guy. Doesn't he like weird things? Feng replied that of course not. He loved them so much. But Ung felt a strange sensation as if the sun was burning the back of his head, even though it was in the front. During training, who started beating Un again, and he didn't even regret it, because yesterday the same thing happened again. But the master saw this, and told Hu that this was a review lesson not meant for fighting. He should refrain from direct hits. Hu realized his mistake and replied that he was asking for forgiveness. But Ung knew that this was just an empty warning. And because of Yun Shi Hu's active support, even the inner disciples of the sect are wary of him. But Feng watched and told him that the elbow strike should be done without any preparation. And trying to hit harder, he strains his upper body too much and loses his balance and is counterattacked. Feng told him that this would not work and asked if he would try to do as he told him. Unasked how it was, the teacher came up to him and told him to concentrate. The boy immediately apologized to him. The teacher told Un that when he received a blow to the chin, instead of an elbow strike, what other basic technique could he use? Feng said it was 6 grabs and 4 seals. And Ung asked the master, 6 grabs and 4 seals? Who didn't understand and asked him what he said. He wants to use this technique, standing so close, and his stupid head makes him suffer. But Hu had made up his mind and was heading to attack. Feng told him right away that his opponent was coming, and Hu wanted him to try it. Feng was watching everything and ordered him to group himself and shift his weight. Then put both feet on the ground, and you need to keep your balance. And then he'll have to regroup and shift his weight again. But Hu didn't stop and continued to deliver powerful blows. At the very last moment, Un grabbed his leg. Feng saw this and said that he did the right thing. Hu couldn't believe it and looked at him in surprise. But Feng told Un to use both palms now, and pushing with both hands is not only for attacking, but also to control the distance between him and the enemy. Hu immediately realized that he was in trouble and called him a dog, and he can't see anything. Feng told him to block all vision from the front, back, right, left, above, and below. Hu asked him if he was serious, and was he really that stupid at this moment? But Feng ordered him to use dynamic qi circulation. Feng told the boy not to control it directly. Let it flow. Everyone was very surprised and asked, is it really 6 grips and 4 seals? The teacher also noticed that his movements suddenly became quite smooth. Hu got very angry and immediately shouted his name. Feng looked and said, here he is again. Hu pounced on him and asked what kind of tricks he used to elude him. But Ung didn't lose his head and put both hands in front of him, stopping Hu's attack. Feng saw this and said that it was impressive. began to circle him around himself so that he could not make more attacks. Feng said that everything was right. Here it is. And he ordered to attack now. Immediately followed his order and launched a double attack. Who couldn't cope with such an onslaught and couldn't dodge? The students looked at everything with their eyes wide open and asked, "What just happened?" And asked, "Is who okay?" Couldn't believe it and asked if it was really 6 grabs and 4 seals. Feng asked him how he liked it. Was very happy and replied that it was damn nice. And he began to shout that it really was like 6 grabs and 4 seals. Feng also laughed and replied that he did not know why the heavens made such a choice. But what can we say now? Does agree to learn martial arts from him? Did not waste the opportunity and answered the master that he agreed. In the evening after the battle, climbed the mountain and looked at his school. But suddenly Feng said that he was a bastard and asked why he was given hands. Turned around suddenly in surprise and looked. Feng asked, "Is he really such a great teacher who looks like this?" Told the teacher that he had a question. Feng told him to stop laughing when he looked at the drawing. It pissed him off. Told the teacher that if his words were true, then he was in the heavenly kingdom now, right? Feng replied that yes, and asked what was wrong. The guy was surprised and answered that it turns out that the place does exist. He means paradise, and they say that it is a magnificent and cozy place. Feng asked, "What is he talking about?" "It's disgusting here." Was very surprised after such words and asked, "How can this be?" Feng started shouting and replied that he said it was just disgusting here. Didn't believe it and told the teacher how he could say such a thing about an incredible place. Feng asked, "So what? What good is it to hang around here? In this place, Bodhidharma plows the field all day under the scorching sun, and the sky demon knows that because he carries buckets of slop. And what's more, this bastard gets into trouble every time he gets drunk. And he poured all this filth on the children from hell and made them angry." Asked in surprise, "A heavenly demon?" He means that same heavenly demon. Feng replied that it seemed that if he got used to it, everything would be fine. But he died like a fool and left no successor. And if only he had a successor, life here wouldn't be so terrible. And he's almost the youngest here. Unclosed his ears so as not to hear this, and told the master that he could not be heard at all. Feng said, however, he sees that he has a bit of potential. Did not understand and replied that he was asking for forgiveness. Feng said that he didn't know how the pool of providence broke through the barrier and created such a miracle, but there must be a reason for it. And in order to know her, he needs to make a decision, right? Asked in surprise, "A heavenly mirror? A barrier? What did he suddenly start talking about?" Immediately began to worry and thought that he had already screwed up somewhere. But Feng replied that he had not yet and would see him tomorrow. In the outer courtyard of the Wudong sect, training was underway. Knew that, like him, some of the disciples were genuinely interested in martial arts. But there are rich families who force their children to join the Wudong sect to gain the status of an outer disciple. And this is because even if he has good connections, the second and third sons will always be treated as a nuisance. But just like darkness follows light, there are always exceptions. For example, someone like Yin Shi who of the Diakpong Yin clan, and they hate him for opposing him. Maybe that's why they treat him so coldly. Knew that this bastard, who would never leave him alone, he would definitely try to take revenge. He needed to prepare. At that time, who was in the medicine hall in the courtyard of the Wudong sect. He was in great pain because he had been beaten in a sparring match. But a doctor came up to him and said that he seemed very angry, and he would take action, so he should calm down. It was the manager of the medical hall, Shin Jae-yun, who said that the usual punishment did not suit him. Yun replied that he knew. It was related to the eldest son of the Dakpong Yun clan, and what he asked earlier, who got angry and replied that his father had promised him support, so he would receive the report in a couple of days. Yin said that what happened was as expected from a respected clan. He took out a box of pills and handed them to who looked at the object with surprise. Yong said that it was a manifestation of his sincerity to the eldest son of the Diakpong Yun clan. And it's quite a rare elixir, so he asked him to take it right away. Who didn't refuse and ate it right away. Having swallowed the ball, the elixir immediately collapsed inside his body and began to enter every cell of Hu. Hu immediately began to change. His face became even more angry, and his strength was visible from afar. And immediately he shouted at the top of his voice, "Yinu." Feng asked the student if he wanted to know how to stand up to Hu. Ung replied that he did, since he had no chance of winning unless he let his guard down. Feng was surprised and said, "What an objective assessment. And if they fight again, he will beat him until he vents all his anger." Ung told the teacher to stop making fun of him. Did he have any way? The teacher replied that of course he did. Ung was delighted and asked, "Is it true?" He immediately hugged the teacher's drawing and asked him to tell the story faster. Feng replied that he agreed and asked him to just remove his face. After all, it was terrible. Feng told him to listen carefully. He would teach him how to make poison, so he could put it in that idiot's food. And when he woke up a few months later, he would beat him up. Unasked, is his skill really that terrible? Feng asked back, is there any point in answering? Every time he sees his Tai Chi skills, he wants to tear his eyes out. And of course, his skills are disgusting. Feng asked the student, why is he angry? Unasked if there were any martial arts in heaven that could help him fix this, Feng replied that he was going to teach him anyway, since he was now his master. Unasked him if the master was serious, Feng replied that of course. This is a martial art that he created himself. Feng started training and looked at his hand and asked, is this the right hand? How strange. Quite a while had passed, so he wasn't really sure. And he asked the guy, where is he going? Turned around and replied that he was shocked by the mere thought of his greatness. And he knew he couldn't tell the teacher that he thought he was wasting his time learning some nonsense. Feng asked, what is this reaction? Very surprising, and ordered him to sit down and cross his legs. The teacher said that from now on, he could be offended by him as much as he wanted. As soon as he accepted his offer, he became his disciple. Was surprised and asked the teacher with surprise, what is he talking about? And suddenly a chill ran down his spine. Feng sent his energy to the student and told him to accept it, and he would teach him mind control. The teacher said that this is the study of cultivation techniques. Received powers and began to take them into his body. Then the pain was very strong, and he needed to stand. Feng looked and said that this was a guide for those who wanted to walk the righteous path, so he would not miss anything. Received a powerful force that could raise him to a new level. Feng told him that now, after this, he could stand up. But it may be difficult for him to fully master this cultivation technique so soon. For now, it can only help him avoid injury during training and get rid of useless habits. But suddenly, opened his eyes after receiving powers and saw that there were leaves lying on his hands. Feng himself was surprised and asked him if he could repeat it. Did not understand and replied that he would try. Began to demonstrate his new powers that he had received, and he was very good at wielding the power of wind. Rose to a new level after Feng transferred some of his powers and abilities to him. Feng was very surprised and said that this was incredible, and ordered him to now gather energy on his fingertips. And then he needs to think about creating waves on the surface of the water. It doesn't matter if they are small. Unasked, waves with your fingertips? And immediately he was able to hold the fox with the energy of his fingers. Himself was very surprised and understood what it was. Feng also could not believe it and said that he had made very big waves. Feng said that this was very good and it was time to move on. Each time they all climbed higher up the ladder and learned new powers. Feng couldn't believe it and asked with every big step, how does he do this? After a few days, Feng saw all this and said that it was enough. Had risen very high with the help of such powers and his aspiration. Asked, can he defeat Hu now? Feng replied that no outer disciple is his opponent anymore. And since he had mastered the technique of mindful cultivation, he would no longer be distracted by trivial matters. Just like his master, Feng began to gnaw his feet and was very afraid. Asked, what does he mean? Go down the mountain? The teacher heard everything at this time and asked, what has the Wudong sect become? And replied, what a dumbass he was. That was why he hadn't achieved anything yet. He told him to get off the mountain and never come near that place again. Asked why? Is it because of Hu? Has Wudong always been such a place? Yin got angry and replied that he was such a small fry. How dare he criticize the great Wudong sect? Let him get out immediately, and his last mercy was to let him go without punishment. Unasked, how could this be? Un knew that he had to restrain himself. He would have lost his temper if he hadn't learned the mindful cultivation technique. Un was not happy with Mr. Yin's decision, and as he left, he knew he had to be patient for now. He would just wait. He would make him regret it. On the way, Un said that it was still good. But Feng was furious and asked what was good about it. Un replied that he meant that he immediately started calling him master. It would be strange if he called him ancestor after he was kicked out of the Wudong sect. Feng replied, "What nonsense is this?" But suddenly he turned his head to the side and saw a building that was very close. Un bowed and told the master that although he was leaving the Wudong sect, his disciple would perform the 9 bows ritual for him. But who came up to him and asked what he was doing? Kneeling down to apologize for his mistake? And if he is going to do it, then let him do it properly, and preferably in front of him. Let him start begging for forgiveness, and maybe he will let him go after a little beating. Unasked if he wanted to be knocked out with one hit again, who got angry, and immediately everyone flew at him at once. Un began to see all their attacks in slow motion, and said in surprise that he could see everything. Feng replied that, of course. That's why it's called lucid. Who saw everything and became more and more angry. But when he saw how Un scattered his guys in different directions, he was surprised. Un asked him why he froze. Let him attack already. Why was he waiting? After all, he wanted to teach him a lesson so much. Who got angry and told his allies that they were useless trash. And as he started attacking, he said that he would remind him of the good old days. Feng told the disciple to be on guard. The eyes of this bastard, he is clearly not himself. Ung told the master that he understood everything, who did not stop there and continued his attack. Un saw his eyes and thought, could it be that he combined the steps of the bowstring and the heavy palm? The master told him to wait until he put up a block with his hand, and he would have to grab it like a hook. Let him feel it himself, and then he will be able to avoid it. And then he will have to understand, because this is intuitive understanding. Who was very surprised and thought, how could this be? This couldn't happen. But Un was even smarter, and moving his body to the side, he tripped up Hun, who couldn't stand and fell to the ground. Who didn't understand, he had taken the elixir. Why couldn't he land a single blow? Un told him to stop right now. He still tries to suppress it with brute force. This is not the martial arts of the Wudong sect. Who asked, what kind of nonsense is he talking about? And immediately he went to attack him. But Un did not expect such a turn of events, and closed his eyes from the fact that the bastard threw dirt in his eyes. Who said he was a cowardly rat? How stupid. When it comes to fighting, there is no room for honor. Un replied that maybe he was right, and immediately released the energy from his hands and sent it straight to the enemy's head, who did not understand what had happened, and, seeing the stone, did not understand how such a thing could have happened that he had not even noticed. Un immediately grabbed him by the throat and said that he was caught, who began to ask him to stop and not do this. But Un did not stop at his request, and delivered a strong attack with his fist to the enemy's body, who asked him how he became so strong. Un replied that it was none of his business, and he ordered him never to appear before him again, unless he wanted to be trampled again. Who asked what? And asked him to stop. But Un did not listen to him, and continued on his way. At this time, Feng was saying in his city that his 10 years of chronic stagnation had finally passed. And was the heavenly kingdom always so beautiful? And that couldn't be. He turned to Un and said that in the martial arts of the Orthodox faction, he himself was the only enemy that needed to be considered first. And to perfect martial arts means to surpass one's former self. It should not focus only on defeating others. Does he understand this? Un replied that yes, he understood. Feng asked in surprise, really? The guy replied that of course he did. He realized so much. Feng couldn't believe his words. After all, he was worried that his cruelty would be so strong that he wouldn't be able to ascend to heaven. But this little one, and suddenly Feng remembered that he had an order from the Jade Emperor. He had to finish it. He would return, and Un could find a refuge for himself. Feng went about his business and said that if he raised this brat properly, he would no longer be considered one of the younger ones. But the chief saw Feng's mood and asked what he was doing here. Why was he having so much fun? Arriving in Shenyang County, Un said that he had returned. His parents were immediately overjoyed when they saw him, and his younger brother Wu immediately ran to hug his brother. Jin greeted his son and said that they were glad to see the future martial artist because he returned safe and sound. Un told his father that he had no forgiveness. Jin said that everything was fine. If his words were true, then it was the Wudong sect that was unlucky. His mother told him that his father couldn't sleep a wink when he heard the news. Jin told his wife to stop doing that. Un felt that his father seemed to be very worried, still as kind as ever, although trying to maintain a stern appearance. He told Ung to hurry up and greet his grandfather. Ung ran up and greeted him, saying that he was home. Yong Jai Aing's grandfather, the man who made him admire martial artists, and met his grandson and said hello. M said that if everything had gone smoothly, he would not have returned home. He asked his grandson if he had been expelled. Un replied that yes, that was it. M asked if it was his fault. Un replied that he had done something, but it was not his fault. Grandpa said that it was okay then. So what did he plan to do next? Un replied that he was thinking about staying home for a while. Yim asked if he had given up on being a martial artist. Yim asked Una if he remembered what he had told him earlier. He was not obliged to live a great life. Un told his grandfather that if he really wanted it, he would support him even if he wanted to hold a sword instead of a hand. That's what his grandfather told him. Yim asked, but is he really going to give up like that? Un replied that he hasn't given up. He has a goal. Something happened and he had to go home, but he's not going to stop. M thought and said that he understood and he could go. Un replied that that was fine then and that he could now deviate. He wondered when was the last time this child had looked him straight in the eye. His gaze had become much more confident in the time they had not seen each other. And when did his grandson grow so big? Ung went outside and said that he had finished all the necessary work. He couldn't shirk training. But suddenly he stopped in surprise. He saw a large stone nearby, and standing on it, he continued to train. Un knew that, thanks to the conscious cultivation technique, the conversation with his grandfather had gone much better than he had expected. He was a good person, but he was always nervous in front of him. Feng asked, "How talented is he that he has such hopes for him?" Un asked in surprise, "Master." But there was another person standing in front of the magic ball at that moment. He said that it was a conscious cultivation technique. It is a combination of the secret technique of Tao, combined with the canon of muscle change, and supplemented with the techniques of Tianju Yoga. Un asked the master if he was back yet. He spoke as if he was planning to leave for a long time, but his manner of speaking had changed a little. The teacher asked the student if he could hear him. This teacher was Bodhidharma. Un asked, "What is this strange conversation?" Un asked the teacher if he could stop joking already, and it seemed the master was getting quite bored. The teacher was surprised by this, since no one had called the master for a long time. But Un remembered that the master had told him that he could complain as much as he wanted. And maybe that's why he makes him train so hard. And he told the master to speak the same way as before. The master asked him if he could teach him one martial arts technique. Un told the master that he would consider it an honor, and he asked him to teach him anything he wants. Master told Un that he really liked it when he called a master. He would show him until he mastered it completely, and he shouldn't rush and learn the technique properly. But Yinu thought it was very strange. Every time his body absorbs this technique, he feels a solid core forming inside, and an unshakable root system. Un came to his senses after a long training and asked the master what it was. He felt as if the chi flowing in him was becoming his blood and flesh. The master replied that it was called the essence of the earth, and what he taught him was the technique of the earth essence. Ung said that the name suited these martial arts perfectly. He felt that a hardcore was being born in the body. The master was surprised and replied that he had grasped the essence of martial arts so quickly, and that he was indeed a talented guy with a clear mind. The master thought that he had been observing him for several days and now understood how Feng had laid such a solid foundation. Unask din surprise, Xian Feng, isn't he his master? At this time, Feng came tired and said that he had finally finished. And now this Jade Emperor has sucked the soul out of him. And now it's time for him to go to his dear disciple. But the second master stood in front of the ball and asked if he should distract it a little. Feng, seeing this picture, became very angry and approached him and asked what the hell he was doing here. Un immediately said that this was Master Feng's voice. Feng pounced on him and asked if he was going to leave here, but Un heard that Feng had turned to a man named Daruma. He was immediately afraid that he had done something wrong and that this deceiver had taught him the wrong thing. Daruma, in Sanskrit he is called Bodhidharma, and in the Central Plains Putademo, a legendary martial artist, most often referred to as Daruma, the founder who first opened the gates of Shaolin in the heavenly forest on Mount Songzhong. Feng asked his student what he had learned. Ung replied that it was the earth essence technique. Feng started shouting and saying that it should have been the divine technique of the earth core. Un replied that it turned out that he had learned another martial art. History says that if two methods have the same root, they can be linked, and he had already studied Wudong and Shaolin. And if these two techniques collide, it will be a disaster. Un said that then, it seems like he will have to stop practicing the earth essence technique and even the earth core divine technique. But Feng said that it was not so and suggested that he get to know her. Un asked the master if he was serious. Feng replied that it was annoying, but this old man Dharma had really refined the earth core divine technique well. It fills in the gaps and even smooths out those moments that would contradict the already studied technique of conscious cultivation. It would be one thing if they did not know about it, but once a better way has been found, it cannot be abandoned. Un noticed that Master Feng's pride was greatly hurt. And considering that his pride is higher than the sky, this is understandable. Someone else showed his disciple a better way. Such an outcome is not surprising. And yet, despite this, he suggests that he adopt a better way. He values the student's development more than his own pride. Feng asked the student what was wrong with his face. Ung told the master that he was very touched. Feng started yelling at him and saying that he was getting emotional over such a trivial thing, and he actually felt a little sorry for the guy. Un asked Feng if he was in debt to Master Daruma. Feng asked in surprise, "In debt? No way." Daruma said that it was because the canon changes in muscles were included in a mindful cultivation technique that he learned. Un asked in surprise, "Canon changes in muscles? They say he learned it?" Feng replied that he did. Since he couldn't change his fragile body with just Tao training, he added several canon methods to change his muscles. And with the help of the technique of conscious cultivation, he passed them on to him. Un was surprised and asked, "Isn't this stealing?" Feng got angry and asked what kind of face he had. Un bowed and thanked the master, and said that he was really amazing, and asked if he could really learn the canon of muscle change. Feng replied that he could. His second master, who created him, had already given his consent. Dharma said it was better not to reveal it to the public. Shaolin usually attracts cruel people. Feng asked in surprise, "What? The canon of muscle change? Where did he learn it?" Un replied that Master Dharma taught him. Feng got angry and said that this kid was crazy. Un knew that, to be honest, if he heard something like that, he would probably get angry and paint his own face. But who cares, Un thought. He follows Master Feng and is now proud to be considered a Dharma disciple. Un bowed and said that he greeted his masters, and it was a great honor for him to be their student. Feng looked and replied that it was all natural. Un noticed that their pride simply amazed him. Feng said that no matter what, he would teach him in a way that would integrate it with Buddhist martial arts as much as possible. So he should learn everything he tells him. Dharma told him to study hard. He too will do his best not to deprive him of skills. Un was very happy and told him to take care of him. And now all the difficulties that were before are behind. And for now, on everything will be like clockwork. After a month, Un became much stronger and trained his techniques and muscle strength every day. Feng watched him and said that if he lost his breath even a little, he would end up as a crippled idiot. Un felt at that moment that this was not like clockwork at all, and more like a road to hell. Un lay down after training and began to rest. Feng saw this and asked, "Did anyone say that it was possible to rest? It's time to move on." Un, through pain and suffering, answered the master that he was already getting up, and immediately began the next training called agility and gymnastics. Un understood that if the technique of conscious cultivation strengthens and saturates the mind and spirit, Then the divine technique of the earthly core develops and strengthens the body. And like the Earth's crust, which covers everything, thanks to this, the speed of recovery has also increased. Sat down to rest for a while near the tree, but he understood that the masters were watching to make sure that he didn't do anything carelessly. And so they train him in such a way that he is constantly on the verge of death. He has thought about giving up hundreds of times, but the reason he didn't give it up was the burning desire to prove them wrong. The master shouted again that there was no time to rest. It was time to keep working. Unanswered that yes, he was already on his way. But when he stood up, he felt that someone was moving through the trees and that he was very fast. The guy in a mask came down and said that this was the place, this guy's training ground. But when he looked around, he was very surprised. The guy asked if this was the work of that brat, but crept up behind him and asked who they had here. The guy saw his face and immediately started attacking with his elbow. But was already prepared and immediately dodged. And having got into a good position, he immediately kicked him. But the guy turned out to be smart too, and having grouped himself, he immediately took a stance. The boy took off his mask and told that he had grown a lot in such a short time. Hadn't he? Asked where he came from. It was his best friend, the eldest son of the Beck family, a clan of guards. Among people, he is known as the most outstanding genius. Ho said that he wanted to quickly say hello. He just dodged. Knew that although he should be called a crazy asshole, Ho said that now they would see if he would dodge it. Was not afraid and responded to him to attack. Hua immediately used the Manhwa chaotic bloom attack, a variation of the Hua mountain striking technique. But was even faster and immediately felt that something big was flying at him. But he understood that it was characterized by fast and unpredictable blows. But despite the constantly changing trajectories, the elbows had the least movement, and immediately grabbed him by the elbow. Didn't try too hard and immediately turned him over. He slammed his whole body into the ground, but he held his head with his foot so that he wouldn't hit too hard. Held out his hand and said that it seemed like they hadn't seen each other for a long time. They both started laughing because they were having so much fun. But when he decided to take a walk, Ho said that this is what he was doing. Since he was back, he should have visited his older brother first. Replied that such a genius would not understand. How could he look him in the eyes when he was shamefully expelled? Ho replied that, frankly speaking, he had become incredibly strong. Unasked in surprise, really? Ho understood that given that they had excluded a person like him, the Wudong sect was now a thing of the past. And leaving his skills to rot in this place would be a great loss. And suddenly a great idea came to him. Ho ran away immediately after he found an idea. Didn't understand him and asked him where he went. The guy replied that they would see each other later. Thought about it and said that he had a bad feeling about this. And after a few days, asked the boy if he wanted him to join him. Ho replied that he did. And instead of hanging around at home, wouldn't it be better to practice? Asked in surprise, practice? But Master Feng immediately said that he definitely lacked experience. Dharma also supported and said that this was a great opportunity. Immediately thought about it and said that he agreed. Ho was delighted and replied that he knew the boy would agree. And immediately after that, they came to the security bureau of the Bat Clan. The Bat Clan sells most of the goods in Xinjiang County through them. And even after the wars have ceased, chaos still reigns in the world due to the confrontation between orthodox, unorthodox, and demonic forces. And because of this, it is risky for traders to move around without an escort. So security agencies in Urim have a huge influence. When he entered, said that it was so spacious and beautiful. Replied that it was just such a hassle to clean it. Master Fact said that the guy was right. Cleaning is the shittiest job. Dharma replied that even here there is no end in sight. Asked his master what he was doing in heaven anyway, and wondered out loud if they would make him do strange things when he went there. Ho was surprised and asked why he was suddenly talking to himself. Told him not to pay attention. He had been practicing martial arts all alone for the past few days, so he could sometimes talk to himself. Ho looked at his face and said that it was very suspicious. But at that moment, the most beautiful girl in the Murime passed by them. The girl looked at them and told Un that he had come. It was the eldest daughter of the Beck clan, Beck Sol. Un moved his friend aside and told his sister that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. And she looked at him and said that he had changed a lot since their last meeting. Un asked in surprise, "Really?" "She's doing well too, as he can see from her body and charisma." Ho began to laugh and imagine what he would say, that he couldn't even imagine how she cried when he left them. Then the news came that he had returned, and she lay awake at night, waiting for their meeting. But he started laughing and hit Ho and told him to stop joking. And as she left, she said that they would see each other later. Un asked his friend how he was. But after that, a man with people suddenly came and said that this is who came to them. The man was the head of the security bureau of the Beck clan, and his name was Jin Song. He told Yanu that they had not seen each other for a long time. Sun started hitting him on the back and asking how much time had passed, and his body became quite toned. Sun said that he was worried when he heard that he wanted to go with Ho. But now he sees that he was worried in vain. Un asked the chief what he was talking about. Un was very angry and realized that his friend Ho was doing whatever he wanted. And it was no wonder that the guards were looking at him as if they wanted to kill him. They definitely think he's an uninvited guest who got in through connections. Sun put his hand on his shoulder and said he was skilled enough. And this is only his decision. And the opinion of these people is also important. Un asked, to whom should he prove himself? Sun replied that in front of anyone who was dissatisfied, but it would be better if in front of everyone. One of the guards felt that he did not like Un. He looked like a man who lived in the illusion that anyone could handle the work of their bureau. He knew that even he had to go through tough competition to get this job. He wouldn't accept a brat who only got in because of his connections. Sun turned to his men and asked if there were any volunteers. One of the boys came out and told the chief that he would be the first. But what infuriates one of them the most is that this little rat has set his sights on the young. And how dare a Pole who couldn't even endure the training in the outer sect of Wudong and ran away? Look at the young lady. The guard turned to him and said that he heard that he had been kicked out of the Wudong outer sect. Un asked, so what? The guard was surprised and decided to hit him, shouting that he was an impudent boy, but Un abruptly stepped back and dodged. Un immediately saw that his attacks were filled with emotion. He must be very hostile towards him. Although he is weaker than Hua, he is very serious. The guard asked him how much food he will defend himself for, but Un knew that since his attacks were full of malice, he clearly wanted to hurt him. He hated Hu, so he fought him without hesitation. But he has nothing against this guy. Un thought in a moment, how much strength should he use? Sun looked at the duel at this time and understood that even if he had claws that could tear others apart, his soft-heartedness might not allow him to fully master them. And it is a fight in which one will certainly harm the other. Thoughts give rise to worries, and worries give rise to indecision. And in the end, he becomes absent-minded. The guard stepped aside and realized that this was the end for the boy. The others said that, as they thought, he was useless. Another guard asked the others what they were hoping for. He had gotten in thanks to connections. Ho asked what was wrong with Un. At that moment, Un was thinking what to do. Master Feck asked him what he was making fun of. Feng said that he was at his limit, not because of a superior opponent, but because of a simple newbie. Does he want to die? Dharma also said that to cultivate, one needs common sense. Let him purify his mind, and his body will move by itself. Un realized at that moment that his masters were right. It wasn't about the people who were looking at him now. Just as they had things that didn't meet their standards, he had things he didn't accept. But since the strongest are teaching him martial arts, his failures will reflect on them too. And he must not tarnish the names of the masters with his mistakes. In choosing the moment, he immediately grabbed his opponent's hand. And even if no one knows that he is their student, Un immediately grabbed him by the shirt and turned over in the same second. The guard did not expect this from him and was very surprised when he flew in the air. Everyone froze at that moment and couldn't believe their eyes. Un immediately realized that he had shown himself what he was really capable of. Un looked at the others and asked why they were standing there. Let them attack already since they started. The guards immediately all pounced on him. At the moment of attack, he understood what he had to do. First, he followed the trajectory, and then he redirected it. Then he needs to find vulnerabilities and exploit them, then interrupt the attack and throw the enemy back. The others got even more angry after this and attacked, saying that he was a small fry. Un was not afraid and began to repel the attacks. The masters told him that he had done a great job, and that was exactly how it should be, and the common good would come. The guy standing next to him thought that even if Ho made trouble, he wouldn't take just anyone as an escort. The boy asked the leader, "Isn't this the little Chunung that he often treated?" It wasn't that long ago that he became an outer disciple of the Wudong sect, but his skills are amazing. Sun replied that this was the essence of their techniques, but beyond that, there was something else in his movements. It seemed strangely familiar. Sun asked the boy what he would say. The boy asked in response how he knew about martial arts. The leader said no, he was talking about Chang'an. The guy replied that he seemed quite capable. Should they take him in? The escort was pretty reliable this time, and it never hurts to have a reliable ally. Sun said that he thought so too. He asked the others if there were any others who wanted to speak out against it, but all the other guards were silent. Sun said that it looked like no one, and then let them take note that Un would be participating in their next mission. Sitting down at the table, Sun asked Un who taught him these martial arts. The guy laughed and did not know how to answer him. Feng asked him why he was hesitating. Let him note that it was he who had made him such a strong disciple. Un replied, "Does the master understand that they will think he is crazy then?" Sun said that the man asked not to disclose his name, right? Un knew that it was the other way around. Sun told him that his skills were different from what was taught in the Wudong sect. Although he was interested, he would not ask questions anymore since he was already an adult. Ho was surprised at this moment and asked his father what he was doing. Sun grabbed his son's head and asked if he wanted to say something. Ho was very hurt and told his father that he was giving up. Song said that he was actually worried when he heard that Un was going to the Wudong sect. But since he joined them through his grandfather's connections, he didn't say anything. The current head of the hall in charge of the outer sect disciples is a complete idiot. Un asked the chief if he knew him. Sun replied that this worthless Shin Ji-yun always divides people into classes. He is disdainful of those who are not supported by the big clans. Sun stood up and told the guy that since he left the sect, he should make a name for himself. The more famous he was, the more this piece of shit would screw up. The morning before the mission began, Un apologized to his parents for making such a sudden decision. M answered him that he was already old enough, so there was no need to ask permission for everything. Father told him to take more money with him, but Mother didn't want to and asked him if he really needed to go. He had just returned. Un told his mother that he needed it and immediately went to the clan to dress up for the mission. But at that moment, he looked at the clan and froze. Ho asked him why he was frozen there. It was time for them to leave. Un answered that he understood everything and was already running. But he did not remove his head from the top of the house and decided that he imagined it. But at that time, a man was standing above the house. On the way, Un told his friend to tell him again about their current mission. Ho replied that it was a request from Zhang In-jiol of the Zongshin Trading Company. He knows about them, right? Zongshin Trading Company, Zhang In-jiol, commonly known as Mr. Zhang. He is quite famous in these parts. Like his grandfather, Chongying was a government official, which gave him good connections in Hubei. And what sets Zhang Yin apart from his grandfather is that even his friendships were made for the sake of gain. Any friendship would fade if there were no more advantages he could take advantage of. And after leaving his post, Zhang and Jewel actively used his connections to establish a trading company. And what happened in the end? Incredible success. Several traders united to do big business. And Zongshin Trading Company grew to such an extent that it pushed out all the established establishments. And the most interesting thing is among the people he instantly pushed out of the market. And there were many who helped him at the very beginning. They were stabbed in the back and had everything taken away. And Jung and Jewel is very disgusting. Although Angel and his grandfather have similar paths, this nasty character alone proves the huge difference between them. Ho said that halfway through they would join forces with the Mengwon Security Bureau. Once they delivered the goods to their destination, they would be free. Ung replied that, frankly, he didn't understand at all. Security agencies never work together. Does that make sense? And hiring two security firms is like declaring that he doesn't trust either of them. Doesn't that hurt anyone's pride? Ho replied that it was true. something like this usually didn't happen. In fact, if they were to receive such a request, they would reject it without hesitation. But they had a debt to pay to the Manhwa Security Bureau, and realized that they were doing this for them. And to repay the debt, the Manhwa Security Bureau is handling the request, and the Beck Family Security Bureau is just helping them. Ho asked what kind of goods these were. Ho answered in confidence that they were fake. Un was surprised and asked in surprise what. The guy answered that it was a trick. Un asked that the fact that they increased their power so quickly means that many have become their enemies, right? And the one that Zongshin Trading Company is most wary of is the Hongwu sect. As Zongshin Trading Company grew, it began to encroach on many of their interests. Ho said that this is why the Hongwu sect is trying to at least do something to counter it. But Jung and Jael has such good connections that there is nothing they can do. The situation changed a little because of a newly appointed official in the Ministry of Personnel. Unasked, is this in Hubei? The Ministry of Human Resources is responsible for human resource management. As someone who values connections, Injel would definitely want to establish a relationship with this person. Unasked in surprise, is it really about bribes? Ho replied that to be more precise, it is a decoy that imitates bribes. And while the two security agencies are delivering the goods, attracting attention to themselves, the real cargo is being transported in a completely different way. As expected, he doesn't like it at all. But suddenly Un put his hand and stopped Ho. After all, he felt that someone was watching them. Sun also noticed something and stopped everyone by showing his hand. The guards immediately surrounded the goods and began to guard them. The guard asked what happened. There was no one here. But Un immediately assumed his pose and began to listen to various little things. He immediately said that this was murderous intent. But at that moment the guard looked around the convoy and said that there was no one here. What should they be afraid of? But then he heard a rustle in the bushes, and the enemy immediately rushed at him with his sword. The guard realized that he would say goodbye to his life right now. But Un couldn't let that happen and managed to block the attack. The enemy looked at them and told the guard that he was very lucky, and immediately tried to attack again, but Un dodged his blade. The enemy realized that this brat is not so simple. With each of his attacks, he manages to easily dodge them. The enemy knew it was no accident. The boy had foreseen all his attacks. Un looked around and saw that there were already two of them. Un understood that the senses convey all the information about the enemy, his steps, movements, and even his breathing. This is the path from Wudong to Shaolin. But the enemies immediately looked and saw that the boy had destroyed one of them. Un saw immediately that they were in disarray, and those whose spirit was broken became easy targets. And how childish it turns out, said Master Feng. But for Un it was torture because it immediately blocked his ears. Un asked the master why he shouted so suddenly. Dharma replied that he should destroy his gaze and look deep inside. Let him not create problems in his thoughts and his vision of the world. Un thought, does this mean that he has limited perception? What did he miss? Un looked around and saw that the cargo was in danger. Ho shouted at him not to go too far. Otherwise, their formation would collapse. Un realized at that moment that he had become too arrogant, and the purpose of their mission was escort, and he was focused on the fight. But at that moment, the enemies immediately pounced on him and asked the brat why he had eyes on the back of his head. But the enemy told him not to be afraid, and since his stance was broken, this was their chance. But Un was much faster and miraculously got behind the enemy and used the softness of Wudong Mountain, the explosive power of Shaolin. The enemy was very surprised after this because Un got very close and attacked with both legs. Ho looked and told his friend that he didn't use the sword at all, and asked why does he need it. But Chief Song was fighting the enemies at that time and said that the Manhwa Security Bureau had not asked for help for no reason. The guard didn't lag behind and said that he had gotten a rather troublesome task, and he asked the chief if maybe it was time to give up. Sun replied that it was impossible. They hadn't paid their debt yet. And by the way, he saw it too, didn't he? The guard asked the chief, was he talking about Chang'an? And it seemed that he and his son were interested in Yuan's skills. Sun replied that, of course. They were quite interesting. The leader understood that even though this child had been expelled from the Wudong sect, he could still use their complex techniques. But how did he know the Shaolin techniques? Was it really what he thought it was? Song looked around and said that they had almost figured everything out. He immediately ordered that they tie up all the survivors and that they join Minvin's guard as soon as possible. After the battle, Dharma said that he had managed to overcome it without serious losses. Feng replied that all that was left was to join that security bureau. He thought and ordered Un to pull himself together and come to his senses. Un was surprised and asked, "What?" But ahead they found themselves in an awkward situation. They saw an army in front of them that had fallen after a battle. The guards asked, "What happened here?" Song examined the bodies and said that those bastards had cut all their insides with swords. Un asked the masters, in their time, this happened often, right? Feng replied, countless times. And those were truly terrifying times. Un thought there was a big difference between realizing something and contemplating it. Now that he had faced it, he realized how terrible it was. If it weren't for the conscious cultivation technique, he wouldn't have been able to control the trembling in his hands. Song immediately ordered the guard to bring him the captured murderers. Standing before the prisoners, Song said that he would not complicate the situation, and everything they knew must be told, and it was better for them not to leave out the slightest detail. The prisoners were frightened and asked the chief to spare them, and they would tell him everything. Song immediately cut the head of one of the prisoners and said that, firstly, if he was unable to give an answer, then he was useless. Sun told them to listen carefully. He would spare only one of them, the one who gave the most useful information. Sun asked if there was a spy in the Chizinshin Trading Company. The prisoner replied that there was. That's exactly what he was talking about. Sun said that was strange. If they had such a reliable source of information, they would have known that the escort operation was a diversion. Ho asked why they were attacking the Myeongwon and Baek security bureaus then. Un replied that their goal was not just to kill. It seemed like they were looking for something, but Feng said it was a lie. Ung asked the master what he was talking about. Sun immediately ordered them to search the cargo in the cart. Let them look for something small that can be hidden even in a human stomach. Nothing should be missed. One of the guards looked at the box in surprise and said, "What have you found?" And it is pure white jade. Sun lost his temper and said that Jewel wanted to set him up, and the Minwon Security Bureau was still a decoy, but the real cargo was hidden with them. Sun asked his man what they should do now. The guy replied that their contract was now invalid. They could stop escorting them right now, and the Zongshin Trading Company would have nothing to complain about. Sun asked him what he thought. Did he understand that they were hesitant to break the contract because of the debt to the Mengwon Security Bureau? And his uncle Song is not the type to borrow money. The debt he did not repay is tied to life. Since their comrades were attacked, they cannot sit on the sidelines. Un said that they had a debt to the Mengwon Security Bureau. Sun said that was correct. Un thought about it and supposed that they should continue then. They would come for them and the jade anyway, so they wouldn't even need to look for them. Sun listened and began to laugh. He said that was a strong word, and he would become a good warrior. Sun turned to his men and said that they had heard everything. They were continuing the escort, and now they would show these murderers who they dared to mess with. Un asked if it was because of him that they felt guilty. Ho replied that it was because of his hands at the body. But suddenly a man with his men came up unexpectedly and told the head of Baek that they were strong enough to be reckoned with. Sun came up and asked, "Does this mean that the Hongwu sect is responsible for all this?" The warrior asked, "Who else is capable of such a thing?" And they would like to avoid unnecessary hostility. However, the Minwon Security Bureau is no match for him, and none of them have any reason to shed blood. Does he agree with him? So only goods. But Song did not allow them to talk to him like that and cut off his head. Sun replied that, unfortunately, he was one of those who believed that it was never too late to repay a debt, and it seemed that today there was no way to avoid bloodshed. Song immediately shouted to his men and ordered them to kill them all. He threw away his cloak and rushed to fight the enemies. But a guard came out in front of Sun and told the chief that he would take them on himself. But a strong enemy came out against him and took the guy on himself. The enemy knocked the sword out of the guard's hands and was ready to launch a strong attack and shouted at him to get out of the way. But Un decided to save his man and, throwing him aside, repelled a strong attack from the enemy. Un felt the power and understood that even though he was able to block, it was still so painful for him. The enemy told him to stop getting on his nerves, and while attacking, he asked if he could do it again. The masters immediately told him not to block, but to dodge. Un was surprised to hear the voices of his masters. Un managed to react and dodge the attack. The enemy said that he spins like Ludigun. Enough of these tricks. What about pride? Does he have none at all? Un stepped back and knew that if he hadn't listened to his teachers and tried to block the blow, his body wouldn't have been able to withstand it. The enemy struck again and shouted at him that he was a small fly, but Un was faster and dodged it easily. He realized that because of his arrogance, he began to use simple attacks. Un picked a very good moment and immediately grabbed his hand, but then he turned him over himself. After making several devastating attacks, he decided to deal with the enemy so that he would not get to them. The enemy came to himself and said that it was not bad for a child, and he was in flames. Un replied that he had put so much force into the blow, his neck should have broken. Did he even have a chance against him? Un asked. Feng said that he was a shameless brat. He had been studying martial arts for less than a year, but was already looking for an easier way. Dharma responded the same way. Judging by his opponent's age, he had been training for at least 20 years. But Feng said that it didn't mean there was no way out, but he would fall unconscious for a few days. Ung replied that he was asking the master to teach him, and that's nothing compared to what he could lose in such a situation. Feng replied that it was fine. Let the boy extract the essence of the conscious cultivation technique. Ung told the master that he would try. The master replied that it was not enough to just try. If he failed, he would die here. The enemy asked him what he was muttering in the heat of battle. Dharma said that he would now impart to him the essence of the divine technique of the earth's core. Unasked if he hadn't already obtained it, Dharma replied that the core technique of the earth essence was the divine technique of the earth core, but he had only taken a part of it to fill his deficiencies. And these two techniques are different. It may be hard, but he doesn't need to understand everything now. Un agreed and decided to learn it. Suddenly, clouds gathered in the sky, and a huge and powerful lightning struck his body. He understood that even with a cleared mind, it was difficult to endure. And if it weren't for the mindful cultivation technique, he would have died already. Un saw the wall begin to crumble and said what he felt. And this incredible power seems to destroy the boundary between his flesh and bones, and fills his entire body. Un understood that liberation from the shell of the earthly essence, the true essence of the divine technique of the earthly core, was revealed. But the enemy pounced on him again and asked what he was trying to say under his nose. But Un opened his eyes and saw a large fist in front of him. Un realized that he would not dodge it anymore, and he thought he could handle it. The master ordered the student to break it and tear it apart. Un did not leave, and also released his strong fist right into the forehead of the enemy's fist. And the enemy's bones could not withstand it and began to crumble. The enemy completely broke his fist. But Un did not stop there and continued to apply his powerful techniques. He completely destroyed this man as he wanted. The enemy could not cope with him and crashed into a tree. Un asked, "So what is the true power of the divine earth core technique?" But he started spitting blood and said that it is truly divine. But suddenly the pain began to come out even more into the street and show its power to everyone. But suddenly he fell to his knees and asked why it happened so suddenly. Feng replied that he had warned him that he would not be able to take a step on his own for several days. Dharma replied the same, that since he had forcibly given him the divine technique of the earth core, he began to experience side effects. The warrior of the Hongwu sect understood that he knew that the Bet clan was strong. That was why they took the elite of the Hongwu sect. But now they were simply crushed. The warrior didn't understand why this was happening. Had the Bat clan always been so strong? Or was it all because of this kid? At that moment, Un felt like his body was being torn apart. Even breathing was hard. But the technology was causing more problems. Feng asked him, is he completely out of his mind? He can still move. Dharma replied that their training is not so ordinary that it would fall apart from something like that. Feng asked, after all, he himself is not able to lift a finger? Dharma told him to immediately pull himself together. Fong told him to take a step on the count of 3. Dharma also replied that it was important to convince himself that he could do it, and Un immediately tried to take a step. Un felt that he could move and thanked his teachers. And now everything will be all right. Fong told the second teacher to watch their Un take his first steps. Dharma replied that it was like raising a child. Un turned to the others and said that they say that if you share your suffering with your neighbor, it will become easier. And so they will feel this pain too, and immediately used Dharma techniques and attacked everyone at once. Ho was surprised and asked, "Is this bastard really in that sect? Wait a second, is this Wudang martial arts?" The enemies asked him what he was muttering. Ho was surprised and thought. He asked, "Don't they know? It is fashionable among the youth of their day to talk to themselves." The enemy asked, "Is this some kind of disease? What kind of nonsense?" But Ho did not explain anything to them and immediately cut them into pieces. Ho smiled and told them to forget it because they wouldn't understand it. The enemy was shouting at his men to stop this puppy. Let them finish him off immediately before he gets even more excited. But Un was already at his peak and dealt with them like novice opponents. Un destroyed all the enemies with one blow. It wasn't even difficult for him. He was just starting to warm up. Un said that he was really at the limit now and immediately fell to the ground. The enemy asked, "What was that? Did he just pass out?" The commander replied that if it weren't for that brat, and immediately ordered them to kill him. They need to finish off that brat. Song immediately ordered his men to stop them and not let them touch even a hair of him. After these words, the guards immediately attacked each other, and a bloodthirsty war began. Sect Commander Hongwu said it was their turn and ordered him to slit this guy's throat. But at this point, Ho came and defended his friend. He asked them how dare they do such a thing, but Song also didn't stand aside and said that they thought they could behead him in front of his eyes. Sun didn't see them as rivals and rolled over them like a skating rink, not leaving a single body alive. The boy asked the leader if he was sure that Un was a disciple of the Wudang sect, martial arts that temporarily increase strength and are usually based on techniques that awaken dormant energy. Isn't it the demonic sects that use something like this? But his chi is pure, not dirty like those bastards. He knows several martial arts that can do this, and he thinks he will find out who taught Un. Dharma asked, "Did they find them?" And Sun said that it is definitely the great sage So Mun. Feng asked, "Why is that?" The guy told the leader that he was talking about an unrivaled genius who was once a disciple of the 9 great sects. Song replied that if it was the 9 great sects fusion cultivation technique, then there was no question about enhancing qi. After all, it was a martial art based on conflict and harmony. Feng said at this point that they were thinking too much. Dharma replied that in fact, from their point of view, this was the most logical argument. What would he say about this? Feng replied that if he thought about it, there were rumors in the heavenly realm about the unification of the martial arts foundations of all 9 great sects into a perfect technique. And although apparently nothing worked out, Sun said that it was time to surrender warrior Hong. Sun asked how it all came to this. Hong replied that it was Jung and Jael. It was because that bastard used them. Sun listened and said that was enough. He would soon repay them in full. Hong replied that it was a pity that he would not be able to see it in person. Hong raised his sword and said to let him make an offer. Could they both retreat? In exchange, accept his life as collateral. Sun replied that gratitude is repaid twice, an insult tenfold. Isn't that the law of the Murim? And naive sympathy will often turn into the blood of one's own people later, and ask them to understand, but those who were involved in the destruction of the Manhwa Security Bureau will be destroyed to the last one. Hong listened and replied that it was like that. He immediately tore his clothes off and said that when his brother came to take revenge, let him convey this message to him, that he was against it. Hong said that Jung Injul was like a snake. You should be patient. It's not like they wanted to start a bloodbath themselves. Sun took the message and said he would put it to good use. Hong said he should take care of it. It had good potential. Sun replied that the child was indeed promising. Hong said that, of course. After all, it was this child who had upset the balance in their plans. If it weren't for him, things wouldn't have been so easy for them. Now it's time to end this. Since these are the last moments, we need to give it our all, like true martial artists. Sun did not refuse such an offer and accepted the fight with dignity. After all, he needed to show what the Bet clan was capable of. All this time, was unconscious, but he had a strange dream in which he was in a strange place where it was snowing. But was under the snow and lay unconscious. But when he came to, he opened his eyes and saw the face of a girl in front of him. He immediately extended his hand to her, said his name. But blinking his eyes, he already saw another face, and asked with surprise, "Sister?" But it was Ho who asked Dung if he was awake. "And what's sister?" And immediately he started laughing. Immediately jumped out of the blood and asked his friend what the hell he was doing and called him crazy. Ho told him to look at himself, and he moved just fine. He thought that because of the pain, he would not be able to move. But suddenly began to hallucinate. Ho replied that he shouldn't have spoken about him like that when he couldn't get up. Let him relax. He would massage him with the Manhwa, chaotic blooming technique. But by this time, Sun came and knocked out his son. He asked the boy how he felt. Looked and said that he was fine. But Sun took his son and told him to rest some more, and he would take this problem away from here. Asked what happened to the people from the Hongwu sect, Sun replied that Hongmun Duck and his subordinates were finished. He thought about letting him go, but in the Murim, such things are not forgiven. Was very surprised and accepted it. Sun told the guy that he had helped him a lot, and now it was better for him to relax. Sat down on the blood and said that it was hard for him to even sit normally. But when he looked up, he saw the other guards. The guard asked him if he was awake. Replied that he was and asked what was wrong. The guard said that he was asking for his forgiveness and was grateful that he had saved him. And he wasn't the only one grateful to him. Replied that he understood everything. The guard immediately ran out of the tent and didn't stop. Left alone, asked the masters if they could hear him. Feng answered that they could. Dharma said that there were no serious problems. That was already good. Thought that he felt as if his whole body was pierced with needles. He asked the teacher how long he would be in this state. Feng replied that he wasn't sure, and maybe 2 days. Dharma replied that he thought so too, and that it would be hard for him to even move for now. Was very surprised and asked how long. Feng replied that it would be more correct to say only 2 days. And this is because he laid the foundation with the earth essence technique. Otherwise, he would have to spend about half a year in bed. Now realized that this was it. The period had been reduced from 6 months to 2 days. Now he realized how well his teachers had developed his body in various ways. But he still thinks that 2 days is too much, and it upsets him. Feng asked in surprise, "Upset? Is he complaining about such luck? How spoiled he is?" Replied that no, that wasn't what he meant. In these 2 days, who knows what kind of shit Ho will try to pull. Dharma said that naturally recovery was always the best choice, but that with a little effort he could move on by tomorrow morning. Of course it would hurt, but not as much as when he first learned the divine technique of the Earth's core. Dharma asked the boy if he could stand it. Stood up and replied that he didn't want to lie flat out for 2 days. It would be better to die of pain. Dharma said that since he was so determined, so be it. And having endured such pain, his willpower is simply incredible. But at that moment, Feng told him to stop. He asked in surprise, did the guy really pass out while standing? Dharma started sweating after this and was very surprised himself. After all, he did not expect that this would happen. On the way, asked the master how long it would take him to fully master the divine technique of the Earth's core. Dharma replied that if you don't torment yourself, it will take about 20 years. Was surprised and said that it was a lot. Asked him if they were serious. He thought he would do it next year. Dharma said that if he was talking about the manifestation he used in the last fight, he would be able to do it again in a month. Was delighted and thought, is this just a manifestation level? And this is an incredible martial art. Feng told him to just wait. He would give him something that would surpass this divine earth core technique. Dharma asked, is there really such a thing? But Feng got very angry and called the second master a baldhead. But told them at that moment not to quarrel. Ho understood and heard that even when he was injured, he could still talk so much. He had easily defeated him last time, hadn't he? He would torment him until he regained his strength. Ho immediately attacked him from behind and told Un to let him take care of him. But Un was already ready at that moment and immediately grabbed him by the hand and lifted him into the air and immediately threw him aside. Everyone was very surprised to see Ho lying on the ground. Sun asked him what happened this time. Ho asked if he had recovered yet. Un replied that he had, and it was all thanks to him. And their way lay to the city of Hubei. The servant told his master that he would take care of delivering to his master the gift he had prepared. The master replied that he was counting on it, and the rest depended only on him. The servant answered the elder that he would not let him down. The elder handed the board with the inscription, Bet Clan Security Bureau, to the servant. The servant took it in his hands and treated it like trash. The servant asked, the Bet Clan Security Bureau? It seemed they had delivered Mr. Zhang's cargo. Sun came over and said yes, that was it. The servant looked at them and thought they were a bunch of thugs. He decided and ordered them to go through, and to hurry up and unload the things inside. And when they finish, there is no need to hang around here, but to leave immediately. People like them cannot stay long in such a place. But Un couldn't allow himself to be addressed like that, and said that the master should show respect. And these people risked their lives to deliver the goods. Of course, he didn't expect a warm welcome, since this is part of the Security Bureau's job, but they can't treat them with disdain. The servant asked why. He himself, as a child, grabbed his sword before his hand. He doesn't even know his place. Un got angry and asked him what he said. Sun stopped him and said that arguing here would be a waste of time, and suggested that they go. The servant was very surprised that this guy had such a character at such a young age. Ho immediately started running with the goods and pushed the servant, saying that they needed to go. Ho did not stop and said that he had so many things to do. It was just awful. The servant was surprised and did not understand how such an impudent person treated him. The servant said that this is why he hates dealing with swordsmen. The warrior asked if he was okay. The servant replied that it did not matter and asked the boy why he had come. The boy replied that he had something to give him. The guy told everything in detail. The servant, hearing such news, was very surprised and asked, "Is it true?" Dharma watched his disciple and said that the minister was probably more important than he seemed. Un asked in surprise, what? Un saw Ho drop the box and asked what was wrong. They looked around and saw the warriors who were all hairless. Ho was very irritated by this and clutched his eyes, trying not to look at them. Un asked in surprise, Shaolin? At this moment, a servant ran up and shouted for them to stop, and said that they were from the Security Bureau of the Bet Clan, who came from Shenyang County. The servant asked if they knew anyone with the last name Yun and the first name Jeje or Nje. It was said that Master so greatly admired this person, and the gentleman will be glad to hear news of this man. Sun replied that he certainly knew, and told Un to come to him for a minute. Sun introduced Ung and said that they had hit the nail on the head, and this guy was this man's grandson. No one knew more about the gentleman than he did. Ung introduced himself right away. The servant saw the guy and was very surprised that he had been rude to him earlier. But Song couldn't help but laugh and ask, "Isn't this fate?" The servants all gathered around him and began to laugh together, pretending that they were not afraid. But the servant realized that he was finished. The servant came to the master and said that he had brought people from their security bureau, the Bet Clan. Zongshin Trading Company CEO Zhang Injul said he was glad they arrived safe and sound, and let them introduce this to Mr. So Yun-Yong, who holds the position of Deputy Minister of Personnel in Hubei. Song came over and introduced himself, saying that he was the head of a small security bureau from Shenyang County. The guy also introduced himself and said that his name was So Yun-Yun. Mr. Zhang had told him a lot about them. Zhel said that Chief Back is a man of pure soul. He has a great reputation and the best skills he knows, so he is the one to turn to if he needs someone who can fight. Yong replied that he trusted him since it was he, Mr. Chan, who recommended him. Un immediately looked and understood that people who had achieved something usually stood out, and maybe they looked decisive, maybe wise. But it seems that this person does not have such traits, as if he adheres to the middle path, not outstanding, but not weak either. And of course, in some ways he is the ideal candidate for a civil servant. But you can't judge a book by its cover. And the one standing next to him is a good example. He smiles like the most innocent person in the world, and with this he hides a completely different side of himself. Young and Jul knows that Mr. Seo admires his grandfather, so he used the Manhwa security agency as a disposable tool, which inadvertently implicated the Beck clan, which is related to his grandfather. Jel said he didn't see any people from the Manhwa Security Bureau. Did something happen? Un immediately looked at him and thought he was a bastard. But Sun looked at him and gave him a sign. He said that regarding this, he needed to tell them something. Before they joined forces with the Manhwa Security Bureau, they were completely wiped out by a group of unknown evil creatures. And asked if this was true, Jel also pretended to be surprised and said that it couldn't be. What a blessing that no one from their bureau was hurt. Did they really not know who it was? Song immediately realized that this bastard wanted him to blame the Hongwu sect, and then he'll benefit if Mr. So hears about it and leaves with a negative impression of the Hongwu sect. And the sly old man will soon get his. Sun said that since his work was finished, he would start to figure out little by little. Jel said that yes, that's exactly how it should be. We need to find those who did this. And he realized that Sun had never mentioned the Hongwu sect until the very end. But Un immediately sensed that this old man had crossed the line. Jel said that since this had happened because of his assignment, he would do everything to help with the investigation. Sun replied that he was glad to hear it. But looking at the head, he thought, what is with that grin of his? And Mu Ho smiles like that when he wants to cheat someone. And Sun's face is probably the same. Sitting down at the table, Jel asked the head of Beck what he wanted to say, but Ho couldn't resist and asked his father to ask about her. Sun took the cloth and opened the ball they found in the goods in front of them. Jel was very surprised and immediately understood what it was. Sun said there was nothing like that on the list of items they asked to deliver. If it didn't belong to anyone, his son would like to take it. And it seems that it belongs to Mr. Chan? Sun immediately noticed that Jel couldn't say no. And it seemed that he couldn't use it as a bribe anymore. And he was very curious about how this old snake would react. But Jel replied that it seemed to him that this was what he had lost, and how ashamed he was. Jel took the rag with the ball and said that he was looking for it, and thought that he gave it to Mr. So, but now it has finally returned to him. Everyone was surprised, but Song was waiting and was very angry. But the masters at that time said that he would not give up even in such a situation. What an interesting turn of events. Jel said that since things had turned out this way, he hoped that Mr. So would accept this gift. Young asked him if he was Mr. Yang's grandson. Un answered that he was. Young asked him if he thought he should accept the gift. Un thought and looked at Ho and saw in his face how he told him to act and not hesitate. Un answered, why not? Yun was surprised and thought and asked, should he accept it? As Mr. Chong said, it was a gift. Jel understood that a gift is given when nothing is expected in return. This is some kind of nonsense that he cannot accept. Yin said that although accepting such an expensive gift with his position might seem like something bad, but Un told him that as long as he kept the balance, everything would be fine, right? Yong asked in surprise, balance? Un replied that as far as he could see, he was doing well. But Yun couldn't help but laugh, saying that his memories from the past were flooding back. Yong said that long ago, when he was still an inexperienced official, he asked his grandfather for advice, and he told him the same thing. And that if he keeps his balance without being partial and keeps to the middle path, he will achieve much. And Un is definitely his grandson. In thought and said that he accepts this gift. But Jel was very happy at that moment that he finally accepted it. Bribe or not, he would definitely look at him favorably after this. But I knew it was too early to celebrate. Dharma was surprised and asked, is there anything else? He seems like a smart person, but if he still hasn't figured it out, then it means that Mu Ho and his father really caught him off guard. And came up and said that he felt he needed to apologize to Mr. Jel. The gentleman replied that he didn't need to. He felt embarrassed. Yun said no, that's not it. Since he accepted the gift, if he takes on something that benefits Mr. Zhang, won't people think he took a bribe? And now he has to be careful. So in the future, when he deals with the Ministry of Personnel, he will have to be a little more careful with Mr. Chong. Jel was surprised by such words that he was even a little taken aback. He asked, there is nothing to be done about it, right? But Jel did not sit at the table for long and told the master that it was time for him to go. But he was very angry. The servant asked Mr. Chan, "Is he leaving already?" Zhao replied, "Those scoundrels! How dare they deceive him? He will repay them 100, no, 1,000 times more." Un looked and saw that, judging from his behavior, he had quite a few enemies. Once today's events were known, there would be many people who wanted to check the relationship between Young In-jul and Seo Yun-yun, and he's going to have a hard time. Ho and Sun looked at him and pointed with their fingers that he had done a great job. After that, Sun went to Mr. So and said that he had something to tell him. Young replied that he hoped he had some request, and he wanted to repay them for reminding him of so many things, and that thanks to them he received a wonderful thing. Sun said that when they arrived, the atmosphere was as if he was connected to Shaolin. Could he give him some advice? Young asked in surprise, "Is the elder's grandson a martial artist?" Un told his uncle that he didn't want that. Sun said that during the last battle, he realized that Un was connected not only to Wudong, but also to Shaolin, and he thought it would be a good idea for him to get some pointers from a trained person. Un saw right away what he had noticed. Song said that it was quite strange that a disciple of the Wudong sect would use Shaolin techniques, but he was sure there were reasons he could not explain. Un understood that as a student of Wujan, he really couldn't explain why he used Shaolin techniques. But if he was taught something here, it could be used with the knowledge that Master Daruma had devoted. Su bowed to Mr. So and said that he asked for the honor. Yen replied that that was it, and after thinking, he replied that he would try. In the evening, the gentleman asked, "Is Gak here?" Gak came immediately and asked Sensei, did he call him? Sensei replied that Mr. So had approached him with a request. He needed his help. Gak got really angry and said that everything was annoying him. He just wanted to enjoy the party and leave. Gak said that they want them to get along just because they're the same age. It's a waste of time. Ho decided to train the guy and asked if he could see. Exactly, right? Ho answered that yes. Even his stomach hurts from laughing. Let him do it again. Huck wondered if this was the same boy. He looked like a typical, spoiled rich kid. Unasked what about Uncle Beck and the others, Ho replied that he thought he was talking to Mr. So about his grandfather, and Uncle Island and the others were preparing to return, and they were told to exchange a few blows. Un replied that it was not a fight, but just training. But suddenly Gak himself came and asked, "His name is Chanung?" Fong got very angry at that moment and said, "This guy has the nerve to introduce himself while standing and waddling." Un introduced himself and said his name was Chanan. That was correct. Gak replied that he didn't care. Surely it was okay to call him Chanan, and he heard that the guy studied Shaolin martial arts, and let him show him what he can do. Gak got angry and told him to hurry up. He didn't have much time. Un thought, maybe he should just leave, but he decided he would have to endure it. Master Daruma was looking forward to meeting the Shaolin. If he just left, he might cause trouble for Uncle Beck and Mr. So. Ung replied that he agreed. He immediately began to take a fighting stance to fight the monk. Un showed his abilities, what he had learned. But Gak looked and asked him if he understood that he was doing everything wrong. Un asked in surprise, what? In his head, he realized that he was picking on the skills passed on by Master Daruma. Gak started waving his hand and saying that this was absolutely wrong. Where did he learn this? Some backward martial arts academy? Feng was laughing at this time and saying that this is what Shaolin has become. Un asked him, is he talking about backwards? Gak replied that these movements lacked grace. Dharma thought, what grace? The Shaolin 5 Beast Fists are both a martial art and a method of self-discipline. And where does grace come from? Dharma said that this stupid monk seems to have shaved his brain along with his head. Unasked, did Master Daruma really say that? Gak said that he expected something like that. Shaolin martial arts are incredibly popular now. Un hoped he'd just shut up at that point. Gak said that any dog would say he's mastered the Shaolin martial arts. Un thought with surprise, a dog, and realized that this was going beyond all bounds. Gak said that the man who trained him said that it was very important, and all the scammers are like that. They want to cheat him and say, this is important, this is a secret technique. At this point, Dharma was ready to explode and said that this was a damn semblance of a monk. I knew he had to do something. It felt like his anger was about to hit him. Gak said that out of the kindness of his heart, he would give him a chance. Let him come and show him in person. how bad what he had learned was. Un asked the master if he heard that. That bastard had dug his own grave. Gak was ready to beat him up and prove that he was weak. Gak understood that this was a real Shaolin martial art, something that such a dumbass had never seen. Hak immediately pounced on him like a dog and struck him with a powerful blow with both hands. But Un stepped back and he missed. Gak tried to get it in every possible way, but each time Un easily dodged it. Gak was very surprised and realized that this guy was fast, just like a rat. And when he attacked, he said that he would never be able to dodge it. But Un was already prepared and asked, "What is he talking about?" But at the last moment he stopped. He understood that after learning the divine technique of the Earth Core, he had an impressive amount of internal energy in his body. And if he hit him with all his strength, he would at least be crippled. Un understood that it seemed like the Shaolin 5 Beast Fists had both rules of attack and retreat. He thinks that the bald guy never learned this. Gak was surprised and thought that this guy was laughing at him. But Gak was not ready to give up so easily and immediately used the Prajna Palm attack. Un saw that it was fast, but dodged and said that he had too many shortcomings. Still, it was just a trick to deceive the eyes. Feng asked, "Meaningless movement in martial arts?" Un answered, "Shitty theatrics." Dharma asked, "What is the name of the one who uses techniques that are easy to read?" Un said he is an idiot. Gak asked in surprise, "An idiot?" Dharma said, "Then who is this bald guy?" Gak immediately used his abilities to their full potential. But Un saw that he was an idiot messing around and immediately threw a punch straight into his face. Gak could not foresee this and was left with a bloody face. But suddenly the chief monk came and told him to stop. Shaolin Monk He-1 said that this guy is Bomb Gak and he hopes the student is doing well. But when he saw the guy, he asked if his name was Chunum. If this was the kid that Mr. So himself was looking after, it would be nice to get to know him. One said that it would only be beneficial for peers to train together. But at that moment, he saw his student Gak flying from Yuan's blow. Vaughn didn't understand what happened and asked, "What's wrong?" And going up to the arena, he told them to stop immediately. The monks asked in surprise, "Master?" Dharma said that it was he who raised that thick-headed fool, and the master is always responsible for the student's mistakes. Dharma said that fools need to be taught a lesson with a good blow. Feng laughed and asked, "Is there another round?" Un asked in surprise, "Another round?" He said he thought this guy was on a different level than that guy. Dharma asked him if he was contradicting the master. Un answered that he was not at all. Although he had not yet even approached the first stage of the technique of the internal energy of the earth, but everything was fine, he would try. One asked the guy if he wanted to compete with him. One replied that if he missed a direct hit, only a wet spot would remain of him. Ung started laughing and said he could feel how much he believed in him. Vaughn said that getting hit was also a lesson of sorts. Un thanked him and said that it inspired him. And even without entering the battle, there is incredible pressure. That's what the difference in level means. Un understood that in this situation, instead of force against force, as in Shaolin, the flexibility and fluidity of the Wudong sect would be more suitable. But this encounter may indeed be a lesson he does not yet understand. Even if it is dangerous, he will choose Shaolin. And if you do it for sure. Un immediately gathered his strength and went to attack Master One. But Vaughn was not afraid of anything and easily placed his hands in front of his fist to repel the attack. Un didn't even expect such a turn of events. Vaughn said that he has power. Feng said that this was the real hand of the mighty Diamond Buddha. Dharma replied that this was an eternal classic. Vaughn used his attack and reflected it. Un was very surprised that he failed and asked, "What?" And he can't just fall down. Un didn't lose his composure and immediately tried to kick Master One in the head in response. But Master One was stronger and managed to put his hand up to block Yuan's blow. Un was surprised again, and Master One attacked in response. Un felt like a wall had fallen on him. Un fell to the ground and couldn't even move. Ho immediately ran to him and asked if he was okay. Un stood up and said that it was certainly offensive. One asked what was offensive, and one noticed that even in such a situation, he managed to throw out a fist. Not an ordinary guy. And who taught him this? Un said that such a result does not satisfy the master. Vaughn answered that of course not. He said that the kid is certainly cheeky. Un looked and said that now even the weak spots are not visible. How can he break through? Dharma said that he was not asking to do the impossible. Thought that if Master Dharma said it was possible, then it really was possible. And even if he strengthens the Earth Essence technique to the limit, it is unlikely that he will succeed against him. Feng asked his student what it was like to stand in front of an opponent who could not be defeated no matter how hard he tried. Dharma asked how he should fight a stronger opponent. Feng replied that everyone has their own weaknesses. Dharma said that on the contrary, even in the most insignificant things, one can find a strong point. And if there are many of these points, then together they become his weapon. Feng asked the student, what is a strong point? Un replied that he was a disciple of his masters. He pulled himself together and showed his fists and prepared to fight to the death. One now understood why Bomgak lost. Although his techniques were outdated and lacked elegance, the essence was completely preserved in them, and Shaolin, in all its purity. And so it's not just luck, but he still has 10 years of training to get there. And now, to demonstrate one of the 3 great Shaolin techniques against the boy, Wang attacked back and told the boy to learn his lesson. Un began to dodge all his attacks, and the master did not even hit once. One asked in surprise, did he dodge? Un immediately picked the moment and realized that this was his moment to deliver the strongest attack. One felt that it was not the energy of Shaolin, and after reflecting it, he gave a counterattack, but Un did not stop and continued to attack. But at that moment, one noticed that the boy had returned to the Shaolin again, and he considered his attack dangerous. But Un didn't stop and decided to break through his protective palm. But he saw that there was a huge hand in front of him. Un realized that he couldn't avoid it. But suddenly, everything changed in 1 second. And Sun told one that he hadn't seen him for a long time. He had changed a lot. He started using the Arhut's divine hand against children. Is he serious? One looked and asked in surprise, Beck Sun? Sun looked and said, this is too much. How dare he use such a powerful technique against a child? Feng was disappointed and said that, as always, at the most interesting place. Just a little more, and he could have taken another step forward. Dharma replied that even what he had achieved was enough to be proud of. Still, it made one wonder how strong their boy could become. Feng replied that it was the disciple's duty to carry out the master's ideals. The next day, Un opened his eyes and asked if he had been unconscious. Feng replied that it was about 4 hours. Dharma asked if his body was okay. Un replied that yes, everything was fine. Feng said that if he had taken a direct hit, he would have had a hole in his chest in the shape of a palm. That fellow song had blocked it, so he only got away with this scar. And he switched off even from the release of residual power. He will need to be thoroughly trained. Un turned to Master Dharma and said that he had tried. He saw that it had hit him in the face. Dharma replied that he had. But that wasn't enough. It was his fault for not being able to teach him properly. Un knew right away that he had to change the subject. Otherwise, he would get angry again. Un asked if it was true that Uncle had stopped that man. Feng replied that he had, and with ease. And they seemed to be acquainted. He addressed him informally, calling him he won. Un thought, wasn't his uncle a disciple of the Hua Mountain sect? With his status, it wouldn't be easy to get acquainted with a disciple of the Shaolin Temple's main monastery. Un said that it turned out he was a serious man. Dharma replied that, as they say, mention the tiger and he will appear. Suddenly Sun came and told one that he said the guy would be out for half a day. But he was already awake. Un stood up and saw his uncle. One bowed and said that first of all, he had to apologize. And while he was unconscious, Bom Gok himself told everything. He admitted that it was his fault. Un said that it was his fault too, for he had rushed in thoughtlessly. One replied that this outcome was due to his haste and the stupidity of the student. So he asked the boy to forgive him, and he doesn't think he can be blamed for anything. Un saw that this man seemed to be a kind and understanding person. Suddenly one told someone to come to them. Gak pulled out his head and asked if he felt better, but Gak understood everything and came up, bowed, and asked for forgiveness. Un asked if he was all right in the head. Gak replied that he had been too rude. Un asked if his head was still buzzing, and the monk said that he had said too much. Un extended his hand and said he could consider them even. Gak shook his hand back and thanked him. One asked if there were any more grievances between him and his student. Un answered that yes, and that they could forget about it. Wang told the guy that if he was interested in Shaolin techniques, why not come and see for himself? Feng started shouting, no. He is his first master. Why should he go to Shaolin? Feng asked again, why should his disciple go to these monks on Mount Sun, when here in Hubei there is Mount Wudong? Dharma answered that he does not want to hear, and gave permission to go to Shaolin. Vaughn asked, isn't this a great opportunity? He wanted to arrange a meeting with them himself, didn't he? Sun replied that it was true, but if only Una was sent there, Soul, I wouldn't let it go. One asked in surprise, Soul, eh? His daughter? Sun didn't want to say and answered that it was his daughter. One started laughing and said that he understood everything. But Un wondered, what does this have to do with Sister Sola? And they say that the women in his family are just incredible. Un thought hard and said that with his Dharma master, he doesn't have to go to Shaolin. But the masters began to question his mind and told him to go. But Feng refused and told him to stay. But Feng made a decision and asked the Dharma master for forgiveness. And then he decided to turn to the others. But Dharma told him that there was something in Shaolin that he had left behind. If he took it, it would greatly help his training. Un immediately changed his mind and said that he definitely wanted to go to Shaolin. But Master Feng got very angry, and Dharma started laughing at him. Feng asked him if he was too happy. Dharma replied that they would go to Shaolin. Arriving at the village, which is located near the Shaolin monastery, Ung asked if they really should have come here themselves. Ho replied that his father was busy anyway, so he couldn't go with them. Ung asked, but why didn't he stay and help his uncle and tag along? Ho replied that he could not go. If he shaved his head, his sister would cut it off. But one approached Ho and asked if his mother was in good health. The boy was surprised and asked if the master really knew his mother. One replied that, of course. There were few in their generation who had not heard of her. Ho asked if his mother was really that famous. The master replied that, of course. What he really wanted to suggest was that Ung should consider staying in Shaolin. But it seems he has many friends who don't want him to go to a monastery, and he doesn't know why Wudong rejected him. But in his opinion, he is more suitable for Shaolin than for Wudong. Un thanked him for his high praise, but unfortunately, he would not be able to join the ranks of Shaolin. Vaughn said that his offer still stood, so if he changed his mind, feel free to contact him. Ung replied that if he changed his mind, he would. But by this time, Gak had arrived and told the master that he thought it was time for them to leave. One told Ung that he would like him to communicate with the scoundrel from time to time while they were going to Shaolin. Gak knew that if he trained with this guy one more time, he would die. One punched the student and said that they were already close to Shaolin, so he should watch his words. Arriving at Shaolin, Un said that this place is much bigger than he heard, and there are many visitors. Feng got angry and said that this was just some kind of bazaar. Dharma replied that this could be considered evidence that their teachings had spread widely. Un asked if there were always so many people here. Gak replied that it wasn't to that extent, but it was probably because of it and pointed at the people. Gak said that the real famous disciples of the Nine School. It is said that they gathered in Shaolin to strengthen harmony and cultivate noble spirits. But Un looked around and suddenly saw in the crowd his former enemy, who studied in Wudong with him. And his name is Yun Shihu. This student of the 9 schools meets from time to time to hold meetings. But what the hell is this fool representing the Wudong sect? Was he too weak to come here? But Un thought it was a good day because he could fight him. But Ho also saw a familiar person and asked, is he here too? Un didn't understand at first and asked, does he know him? Ho replied that his name was Mei Genfen. Un asked who he was and realized that he was talking about someone standing next to Yin Shihu. Ho said that if he didn't know, then it wasn't necessary. Un wondered what his friend had a disagreement with this Mei Genfen. Ho told the boy that Mr. Haywin was waiting. He suggested that he hurry up a little, but Ho was very angry and understood that he had not come to Shaolin for such trifles. It was better not to pay attention. Wang said that in fact, there was another reason why he invited him to Shaolin. Ung asked if he wanted to introduce him to someone. One replied that yes, this someone was very close, and to the origins of the Shaolin martial arts. Ung said that he couldn't wait to meet him. Jarka asked in surprise, source, I wonder if there are still people like that in Shaolin. Un thought that even Master Dharma wasn't too happy with the current Shaolin. Vaughn said he hoped he could learn something from it. Un said sure. But he understood that he was asking for forgiveness if it was disappointing, but he had no special expectations from the so-called master of the origin. After all, he had the master of Dharma, and now something else is more important for him. He needs to find as quickly as possible what the Dharma master left in Shaolin. Arriving at the house, one told the master that it was him. The master immediately heard their voices and answered for them to come in. Seeing the old man, Un immediately noticed that these were infinitely deep eyes, a look full of unyielding will, and an appearance similar to a beggar. And undoubtedly it was him. The master asked, "Did he bring just anyone here again? He's crazy." And this really pisses him off. He thought that this was a really strange old man. But the masters in his head started screaming. Un asked, "Why are they acting like this?" Feng told the boy that he seemed to have the potential to ascend. Dharma replied that now they would finally be freed from the obligation of being juniors. Un thought, can this old man achieve exaltation? And he is so strange. It is difficult to understand the heavens. One said that he met him in the world, and it seems that he knows the origins of Shaolin, so he brought him. Great Master T. Sajo. Unask din surprise. Taitaizayo. He looked and saw that the level above them was Sabekjo, Sasukjo, and Seijo, and T. Sajo was another level above them. Un knew that Master Haywin had quite a high title, but even for him, this old man T. Sajo, he was a monster who had lived for over 100 years. The master said it didn't matter. In any case, the origins no longer had a place in Shaolin, and his student eventually betrayed them too. Vaughn said that the crash courses were a necessary measure to combat the followers of the demon cult. The master replied that this was nonsense. If it is difficult to achieve mastery in youth, then it is better to go out into the world and master the art later, at a more mature age. And such stupid thoughts as the desire to become famous in youth only lead to empty hopes. He does not want to see all this. Let them go. Dharma told Yanu to try to talk to him. Otherwise, he couldn't do anything. The master started yelling again for them to get out. Unthought what to do. But suddenly, strange exclusives fell in front of him. Dharma said that Zongto's sun gun was his incomplete technique that he used before reaching heaven. But he didn't think it was still there. Unask Zongtuok Singon in surprise. The master suddenly stood up from his seat and asked what he said. Un was surprised and thought, what did he get here? The master told him to repeat it immediately. Un replied that it was Zhongtua Shingon. The master took the paper and told him to read it. Un replied that he could not read it. Who would dare to read it? The master used his eyes and replied that no, he would be able to read it. Let him read it. Un closed his eyes and replied that no, he couldn't. He was just an outsider in Shaolin. Un said he didn't know what it was, but even he knew reading the contents would cause problems. Dharma said nothing. Zongto Shingun is a technique that he perfected in heaven. It is different from the unfinished version, so it can be transmitted. The master said he had a great idea and offered Una to become his apprentice. Hong went to Tisajo and told him to stop. Tisajo asked why. Wasn't this what he wanted? Tisajo said that he wanted attention. So now he's unhappy? But Un used his power and realized that he'd had enough. Tisajo asked him how he dared to do this and immediately attacked him with his fists. But he easily repelled each of his attacks, without even breaking a sweat. Tisajo asked, is he by any chance from the Wudong sect? But then Tisajo resigned himself and said it didn't matter. From today on, he was a Shaolin disciple. Un replied that no, he couldn't. Tisajo got very angry and said that he didn't care, and immediately used his technique of bifurcation and surrounded the guy from different sides. Tisajo said that it seemed that words would not persuade him, but if he broke a few bones, he thought he would become more accommodating. Zhuo began to destroy the boy in various ways, but Un stood his ground. He asked how he felt. Would he become his disciple? Un felt like he was about to lose consciousness if he relaxed his control even a little. Un said that if he continued to press like that, he would bite his tongue. Zhuo was surprised and asked what? Zhu thought that if he was pushed a little, he would give in. Was he going to commit suicide? Zhu stopped and asked, is there nothing that can be done? He is asking him, he really needs his help. Un thought that everything was so urgent that he changed his attitude in an instant. It would be better to continue to press by force than like this. Dharma turned to him and asked if he felt sorry for him. Un realized that even Master Dharma had taken pity on him. After such words, it was difficult to refuse. But he doesn't want to stay in Shaolin either. Un said that they should do it this way. If it is about not being an outsider in Shaolin, one can become a disciple who remains in the world. But this will not solve the problem in essence. Zhu asked why. Un replied that the disciples who remained in the world and the disciples of the main monastery could not study martial arts at the same level. The master asked, so what? Un replied that he had heard that in Shaolin there was a title given to those who had provided significant assistance to the monastery. Zhu asked if he meant the title of honorary disciple. Un answered directly that it was correct. Zhu asked if such an option was possible. It was so long ago that few people remember it. Un replied that his grandfather loved to tell stories about the martial arts world. Zhu replied that if it was the last legacy of a Dharma master, it had sufficient value. And having shown the information, he said that he should now read it. Un asked in surprise right now. Zhu asked what was bothering him about these blockheads. Should he deal with them? Un replied that it was not that. First, he needed to officially receive the status of an honorary disciple. And he said that Un is a student. That means everything. If anything happens, he will grab the abbot by the collar a couple of times, and everything will be resolved. Zhu told the others that they were bothering him, so they should leave immediately, and immediately close the door behind them. Zhu said to start. Un took the information and looked at them thinking, what is this all about? He doesn't understand anything. Zhu asked, can he read it? Un replied, no, he can. Just let him wait a little. Un told his master to read faster. He had already hidden behind the information and told him to save his head. Dharma replied that he was embarrassed, as if he was reading a diary from his childhood. Un said, what embarrassment, his head was about to be split. The master replied that it was shameful, but still. Dharma used his powers and began to read. Un saw the entire text and thought that compared to the version of Zonto Shingon that he had studied, and this technique seems more imperfect, like there are gaps in it. Ung said he was finished. At that moment, Zhu was simply enjoying the way the guy was reading all this to him, and he fell into his own thoughts. Zhu thanked the boy and said that he thought that he had never been able to touch the true teachings of the master in his life, and he wanted to become an honorary disciple because he didn't want to be tied to Shaolin, right? And if in the future he encounters difficulties in the Murima, he may call his name. Those who remember him will not dare to harm him. Un asked the master what his name was. The master replied that his real name was Gon, but not everyone knows him. He hides under the name Zhu. Unask tin surprise. Gon? The same Gon who was called the Holy Monk? And this was the name he often heard from his grandfather when he mentioned Shaolin. This is the great monk, known in Murim as the Holy Monk. Gon said that yes, he is the Holy Monk, since he knew everything. Now he too can leave. Un was surprised and asked in surprise, what? But Gon did not explain anything to him and immediately kicked him out. Ho! And the others met him and asked him how he was. Was his head all right? Wang replied that it wasn't quite what he had planned, but anyway, he became a Shaolin disciple. Ho started laughing and said that it was true. Un said that it was his first time in Shaolin. Could he look around a little? One replied that of course. And now he is an honorary student of Shaolin. Let him look around as much as he wants. Un thanked one for this permission. He knew that now he had to find what the Dharma master had left behind. Ung told Ho to go with him. Ho was surprised and asked where. But Gak turned to the master and answered that they were in Shaolin for the first time and he would take them. One grabbed him by the ear and said that he needed to go through manners training again. Hak didn't want the master to leave him. Gak wished the boys good luck and let them take a leisurely stroll. On the way, Ho asked his friend to tell him what this Zonto Shingon was. Un replied that he should shave and become his disciple, and then he would tell. Ho asked in surprise, shave? Ho got angry and asked if he was in his right mind. Un didn't know what exactly the Dharma master had left behind, but it would be great to share it with Ho. After all, he is the one he has to go further with. If only he grows, it could confuse their relationship. And besides, you'll never get bored with him. But suddenly Un saw a very familiar person in front of him. He walked next to Hu, and even their eyes met. Hu asked him what he was doing here. Un immediately lowered his gaze to his fist and thought, asking, is he going to attack? But Hu thought carefully that it would be better not to get involved with him now. It would only complicate things. And he decided to turn away and leave. Un got very angry after this and shouted at his back that he was a pure coward. Ho asked, "Who is this? What kind of guy?" Un replied that he was not usually reserved. On the way, Hu saw that there were many people in front of him. He thought, why did he come here? Now everyone is just ignoring him. A little earlier, one of the guys approached him and asked if he was Sungwon's older brother. Hu turned around and said yes. The guy said that he heard that Hu was a disciple of the Wudong sect who remained in the world, and in front of him stood Mi Jinfin from Huashan. Hu asked, his brother is quite strong, right? Mi replied that it must be very hard for him. His younger brother is such a person. And to be in the shadow of your younger brother, I can't imagine a worse fate. I sympathize. Hu thought that the guy was pretending to console, but in reality, he was just getting on his nerves. This guy is also rotten inside. Mi told him to hold on. The world is harsh, but let him hold on. Hu got angry after such words and told his brother to hold on. Yin told his brother that he understood that it made him angry, but it was better not to deal with him. Besides, since Jiang So-woo was here, the people here were serious. Let him not make a big deal out of it. Hu replied that he understood. Jiang So-woo was the daughter of the head of the gatekeepers, who is said to be one of the top 10 swordsmen in all of Murim. Although she is a woman, her skill has already far surpassed that of her peers. But among outstanding people, she is the most outstanding. Everyone is trying to impress. And what unpleasant personalities. Mei took his men and said that it was time for them to go, and suggested that they continue the feast on the top of Zungu. But one of his men walked past Hu and stopped, asking, "Who is this? Could it be Sungwon's older brother from the Wudong school?" Sungwon, be a good older brother, who got really angry and thought maybe he should kill them all. Mount Songshan consists of 3 major peaks, with Zunguk in the center, Sazal in the west, and Pazel in the east. Shaolin is located on the northern slope of Sazal Peak, which is where it got its name. Dharma told Ung that he should practice the Zhong Tua technique here. Un asked in surprise, right here? Dharma asked if he could handle it. Un answered that Ho would of course look at him askance, but he would try to seize the moment. Un turned to him and said that he was having a hard time, and suggested that he take a rest. Ho asked in surprise now. Un replied that after T. Sajo, he felt exhausted and wanted to rest a bit. And squatting down, he did it. But Ho saw him as a strange man, and again he had something in mind. Un did not waste time and continued to cultivate. They were in the forest all night, but the forest was not empty. And the guard of the forest saw a light in the dark night. The monster went into the light with all his might and decided to see what was going on there. Suddenly, the monster jumped out of the forest and stood in front of them. The boys were both surprised and asked, "A gorilla?" Dharma said that he had finally come. This guy seemed to have been supposed to go to heaven for a long time, but he never did. Un asked in surprise, "To heaven? This one?" Dharma replied that although it looked menacing on the outside, it was actually a spirit that was over 1,000 years old. Un asked if he had used the Zhong Tua technique to summon it. Ho took hold of his sword and shouted at the gorilla not to come any closer, or he would kill him. But Un stopped him and said that everything was fine. He probably wasn't going to attack them. Ho asked in surprise, what? Ho asked, was the gorilla telling them to come closer? Was it safe? Un replied that it seemed so. The gorilla extended his hand to them, and Un asked in surprise, "Does he want to shake hands?" And they shook hands immediately. But after that, he threw Un into the sky. Ho did not understand at first what happened, and watched as his friend in the sky. And after that, he grabbed Ho by the head too, and threw him after Un, who was already in the air. After that, they landed on the gorilla's back, and Ho asked him what he was doing. But Un told him right away to hold on tight. Ho didn't understand and asked why. The gorilla immediately jumped into the air and climbed the mountain. Ho was very scared and told his friend that he had previously said that it was safe. Un told him to be patient for a little while, and it would definitely be worth it. Ho asked if this was something from Legends. Un replied that it might be. He himself didn't know for sure. Ho asked the boy if he had learned about this from a scroll. Un thought that if so, it might look like that to him, and he replied that no, not exactly, but he had received permission from the real owner. He could trust him. Ho said that if he says so, then it is so. Either way, he doesn't care. And the main thing is that it's fun. The gorilla led them to a cave, where part of the cave was covered with flowers. The boys did not understand at all why he brought them here. Ho said it looked like they had arrived. Un looked at the gorilla and saw that he was asking them to wait. Dharma told the disciple that everything was right. He was not a man, but better than any man, and he understood him correctly. Un asked why only Master Dharma was saying something. Dharma replied, that phone was a little busy. The boy became curious and asked what. Dharma replied that he had skipped some work to help him, and now he was working it off. Un looked around and thought that this was an amazing place. And what was hidden here? Un saw his friend going somewhere and asked what he was doing and what was he looking at. But when they reached a dead and they saw a wall that looked very strange. Dharma also saw everything and asked, are they still preserved? Un asked the teacher, what is this? Dharma replied that these were the footprints of a harmful person. Un asked, what harmful person? He thought that from his words, these footprints were left at least in his time. And even after 1,000 years, they still retain their energy. Who could have left them and why? Dharma replied that his friend had much greater potential than he expected, and finding something in these tracks is not such an easy task. However, he must be stopped. It is too early for him to approach them. Un started shouting at Ho to come to his senses. Ho turned around in an instant and showed a completely different face. Un was very surprised by this and saw his friend completely covered in strange energy. Un tried to resist this energy and knew that if he was not brought to his senses, things would be bad. But what should he do? But at that moment, Gorilla came and stood in front of him. Gorilla took all his breath and threw it right at Ho. Ho heard this voice and was released from a strange energy. Un saw that his friend had come to his senses and immediately ran towards him. Un asked if he was okay. Ho didn't understand anything and asked what happened to him. Un asked, what? He doesn't remember? If it weren't for Song's song, he probably would have never woken up. Ho asked how come, but Sun was still standing in his place and suddenly lowered a large vessel in front of them. Ho was completely exhausted and said he was dizzy, but when he saw the vessel, he asked, is this water? And thanked him. Ho immediately picked up the vessel and drank. Dharma immediately said that it was valuable, so he should not spit it out. Un understood immediately and covered Ho's mouth so that he wouldn't spit it out. He told him to drink it all. Afterwards, Sun gave him a vessel with water too. Un sniffed it, and it seemed strange to him. He thought that was 1,000 years old. It certainly hadn't gone bad, but since the teacher said that it was valuable, he would have to drink it. Un understood everything and began to drink water from the vessel. Un drank it all and thanked Sun and said that he was grateful to him and that it was excellent water. And he asked the gorilla if he wanted to give him everything that was left. The gorilla immediately poured him another glass of water. Un knew that since his master said that this water was valuable, it probably strengthened his spiritual power, and he guarded it for 1,000 years without touching it. Indeed, this creature is much nobler than man. Dharma asked, right? And Un decided that then he should get something too, and holding out the vessel back, he said that it was his. Gorilla didn't understand at first. Un told Sun not to worry and drink calmly. And now they are friends. Un left his mark on the ground and showed Sun that they were friends forever. Sun, seeing this, knew and began to rejoice greatly. The dream drank water from the vessel and began to evolve. The energy covered it completely and lifted it into the air. Everything around started to shake, and the forest heard all the screams and sounds. Un didn't understand and asked what was going on. Dharma waited a long time for this moment and greeted his man Sun. Suddenly, this shell rose to the sky. The shell was so bright that the whole world saw it. The dream could not hold on to the shell and came out of it. Everyone was surprised, and Un immediately turned to the master. Dharma replied that this was deliverance. After a long time, he finally met a friend. Before he left, Sun showed a sign that meant they were friends, and this would remain for centuries. Finally, Sun released his part of energy on the guys, and in his final departure, he showed with his finger that he was happy. Dharma told Un that he hoped that one day he would get to that place too, but the boys couldn't take it all in and passed out. Opening his eyes, Dharma asked him if he was awake. Un immediately asked the master how was Sun. Dharma replied that thanks to him, he had arrived safely. Un calmed down and was very happy. The master asked him how he felt. Un replied that he felt completely empty. Usually, when he drank potions, his dantian would be filled to capacity. But now it was completely empty. Dharma told him to try to activate his Zonto technique. Un listened to the master and decided to activate it. Un used it and said it was incredible. What he could only achieve with extreme concentration using the Changmian technique is now so easy. He felt that the empty dantian was filling up. Where did this power come from? And he decided to turn to the master. But Ho came to his senses and started looking for Sun. Un asked if he was awake and said that Sun had gone far away. Ho replied that he understood everything. He didn't even have time to say goodbye properly. Un asked if he was okay, but was suddenly stopped and rolled to his feet. He asked, "What is this?" Has his internal energy increased significantly? His body has become so light. Un said it was time to go back. They were already late. Ho said he was on his way. But Ho looked at the signs that were left by the bad man and said that he thought he could repeat it. Ho decided to try and immediately pulled out his blade, leaving the marks he saw in his head. But then Ho looked and said it wasn't even close. And he thought, who could have left such a thing? Maybe it was someone who had reached the heavens. But Un shouted at him and said they had to go faster. Ho was very happy and thought that for now this was enough. Just following on the heels was already fun. In the forest, the boy asked what he said. The servants answered that they were saying everything as usual. And he also put on a red bandage so that he could be easily recognized at night. The guy said he was asking them to be more careful. He's a demanding guy. And if everything is as usual, they're probably already heading to the top of Jungkook. The servant replied that these rats from the Orthodox factions like to show off. The boy said that it was to their advantage. The boy asked what the results of the reconnaissance were. The servant replied that two were approaching them. The boy asked if the red bandage was visible. The servant replied that it was not. The boy said that they were unlucky. Let them deal with them and join the main group. The servants replied that they understood the order and immediately ran. The boy said that they relaxed, being within the Shaolin domain. The guy got angry and said that they would deal with him quickly and smoothly, and immediately went after them. On the way, Un looked at his friend and asked why he was grinning all the time. Ho replied that he had become stronger. Can't he be happy? Un said, what about those sword marks? But that moment a man appeared in front of him, and he immediately flew into him with his fist. The mercenaries surrounded them from different sides, and Yinu had to fight them with his bare hands. After dealing with everyone, Un asked who these people were. Why did they suddenly attack them? Ho asked his friend if he was okay. Un asked his friend who he thought they were. Ho replied that he had no idea. Maybe he should have asked first and then knocked them out. Dharma said that the move they just used was a Majiao technique. Unasked, Dimon sect? Un said that they were from Majiao. Ho was surprised and asked why he immediately decided that it was Majiao. The guy answered that he had good intuition. Un understood that his Dharma master had said that these were people from Majiao. Did he really notice them right away? And if he did, why didn't he warn him? Or maybe he kept silent about it, because of some principle. Or is it a heavenly law? But it is quite possible. Otherwise, why would he expose his dear student to danger? But suddenly they began to hear strange sounds in the forest. Un asked what that noise was.